Imagine a world where the average barber, the neighborhood grocer, and even the shoeshine boy weren't just saving their money. They were gambling it. They weren't using their own cash, though. They were borrowing up to 90% of the cost of a stock, betting on a future that everyone assured them was infinitely bright. This was America in the summer of 1929. The stock market, a machine meant for wealth creation, had become a national obsession, powered by reckless debt and fueled by pure blinding optimism. One day in October, the music stopped. The boom that seemed eternal evaporated in a matter of hours. Trillions in today's dollars vanished, taking with it the life savings, the businesses, and the very foundation of trust in the financial system. We call it Black Tuesday. But it was more than just a bad day on Wall Street. It was the moment America learned a devastating, unforgettable lesson about greed, debt, and the true cost of an unchecked financial frenzy. Before we dive into the untold story of what really happened, make sure you ask your friends to watch this, like this video, and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the history of money. Why does a financial panic that happened nearly a century ago still matter today? Because the 1929 crash didn't just cause the Great Depression. It provided the blueprint for every financial bubble and subsequent collapse that has followed. From the dot-com bust to the 2008 housing crisis, they are all, at their core, variations on the same theme. We often hear the simplified narrative. Stocks went down, the economy failed. But the truth is far more complex and involves a terrifying intersection of new technology, human psychology, and a central banking system that at the time was still learning how to walk. Understanding 1929 isn't just a history lesson, it's a vital defense mechanism against future systemic risks. We're going to pull back the curtain and show you the three hidden mechanisms, the financial time bombs, that made the Roaring Twenties roar straight into an abyss. The greatest accelerator of the 1929 boom was a simple but lethal mechanism called buying on margin. This is the first thing they never fully explain. A broker could extend credit to a speculator, meaning you could buy, say, $1,000 worth of stock by putting down just $100 of your own money. The remaining $900 was a loan. As long as the stock price kept rising, it was a miracle machine. A 10% gain in the stock became a 100% gain on your actual investment. But here's the killer. The moment the stock fell, even slightly, the broker would issue a margin call, demanding the borrower repay the loan immediately, with prices falling across the board. Millions of these calls went out simultaneously. To pay the debt, people had to sell more stock, which drove prices even lower, triggering more margin calls. This self-reinforcing brutal downward spiral turned a normal market correction into a financial avalanche. The boom was funded by debt, and the collapse was enforced by it. The next hidden factor was a dramatic shift in how money flowed, specifically the role of the newly formed Federal Reserve. The Fed was established in 1913, and by 1929 it was still an organization in its infancy, struggling to understand its own power. Crucially, the prevailing economic mindset was one of laissez-faire or minimal government intervention. As the stock bubble inflated in 1928 and 1929, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York saw the danger and tried to slow things down by increasing the interest rate. But the rate hike was too small and came too late to stop the speculation. Worse, once the panic began, the Fed made a catastrophic mistake. It did not act as the lender of last resort. It stood by and allowed banks to fail, fearing that lending money would only encourage more reckless behavior. A decision based on a fatal misunderstanding of the crisis's magnitude. Liquidity dried up. Trust vanished. The system was allowed to bleed out because the institution designed to stabilize it chose inaction. The final, and perhaps most timeless component is the human element, the unstoppable force of herd mentality. The 1920s brought mass media, mass communication, and an unprecedented feeling of shared prosperity. Speculation became the national sport, justified by the then popular theory that the stock market had entered a permanently high plateau. When the market finally started to shudder in September and early October, many wealthy financiers like the celebrated economist Roger Babson, issued warnings. Yet, they were ignored, even ridiculed by the media and the public. The crowd, convinced by the recent past that stocks only went up, bought the dips right up until the point of no return. Black Tuesday, October 29, 1929, wasn't the day the professionals were shocked. It was the day the general public, convinced they were smarter than history, were finally forced to confront reality. It was a collapse of confidence, long before it was a collapse of capital. So, what is the deepest truth the 1929 crash reveals? It's this: a financial crisis is not an economic event. It is a liquidity event disguised as an insolvency event. The companies themselves, General Motors, AT&T, U.S. Steel, were not worthless on October 30th. Their factories were still standing, their workers were still ready, and their products were still being sold. The true crisis was that the money to pay the debts had disappeared. The debt-driven liquidity machine seized up. Banks weren't insolvent. They simply didn't have enough cash on hand to meet the sudden, simultaneous demand of every terrified saver. The market didn't just fall because of bad business. It fell because the architecture of speculation, massive debt, and minimal regulation forced a panic sale of everything at once. The unseen villain was not simply the bear market, but the terrifying interconnectedness of debt that turned isolated selling into a systemic collapse. The legacy of 1929 is not just the Great Depression, it's the creation of institutions like the FDIC to guarantee bank deposits, the Glass-Steagall Act to separate commercial and investment banking, and the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, to police the market, TA. These were all direct, painful lessons learned in the wake of the crash. What does this mean for us today? It means we must look past the flashy headlines of new technologies and booming sectors and keep our eyes fixed on two fundamentals: debt and psychology. When markets are flooded with easy, cheap debt, and everyone, from the novice investor to the seasoned pro, is convinced that this time is different, the stage is set for a replay. The 1929 crash is a solemn reminder that market madness is the default setting of human nature, and that vigilance, not optimism, is the true secret to protecting your wealth. What other financial mysteries should we unlock next? Let us know in the comments below.